Welcome to the Sober Edge podcast, inspiration for alcohol-free living. I'm your host, Terry Patterson, functional nutritionist and This Naked Mind senior coach. The Sober Edge is a place to explore the infinite possibilities on the other side of drinking. In a culture soaked in booze, discover the wonder and joy of taking a different path. Meet real people living lives of purpose and passion, learn the truth behind the alcohol myths, and get ready to be motivated, inspired, and astounded by what is possible with the Sober Edge. I get so inspired by the guests that I invite onto the podcast. And this week, I just want to highlight the ladies that came forward, shared their own personal journey to stop drinking in their 50s and beyond, and how inspiring each and every one of them are. I keep saying all the ladies because I am going to share 3 of these individuals in the podcast today. And then I have a few more wonderful examples of how to thrive once we leave alcohol behind. And I'm going to air that podcast either next week or in the next couple of weeks. Because here's what I know for sure. This journey of not drinking in our 50s and 60s looks different than it did when we're trying to untangle the mommy wine culture or the stress of a corporate job. We actually, I believe, layer on these reasons for drinking through midlife and beyond over the reasons we already were drinking. And so we end up even more entangled with alcohol than we were when we were younger. So this is a very unique place, and sometimes it can feel lonely and dark. And so I wanted to highlight some of my fellow coaches who I know have created an incredible life on the other side of drinking. And I wanted to have them share their stories, and stay tuned because you're going to hear about the part of midlife that is so challenging when it comes to caregiving and empty nest and doing that kind of in-between parenting where our kids aren't quite out of the house, but we get this sense that they no longer really need us in the same way. There are so many transitions we go through in midlife. And one of my guests today talks about learning to have true marital intimacy with her husband when she learned to love herself first. And so this is a powerful episode. I'm so glad you're tuning in, and I hope you enjoy it. Please comment and let me know what you think about these amazing women. All right. Well, I have Michelle Renee Cuniff with me right now. And Michelle, thank you so much for coming and sharing part of your story around this journey to stop drinking in your 50s and beyond. And I know when we chatted before, you mentioned that you had stopped drinking at the age of 57. Tell me what happened. Why was it 57 that created this need to change?
Well, actually, Terry, that was a build-up to 57. I had been trying, and I really went back to when was I really getting curious that I needed to make a change with alcohol? And it was around about 7 years earlier, to be quite honest with you, and close to even a decade earlier, I was questioning my drinking. It really didn't come to a place where I felt I absolutely needed to change. And at 57, I didn't hit rock bottom, but I was close. My life was spiraling down. It didn't look like it on the surface, but internally, I was not a happy person. I was angry. I was sad. I was lonely. You would never know that. I had plenty of people around me, but it really didn't happen until I was 57 that I absolutely needed to make a change. I knew for sure.
Yeah, that echoes so much of what I hear. And part of this, reason that I became a coach was to help women like you and me so that we don't stay stuck quite as long. I
Oh,
didn't stop drinking until I was 55. And I literally have memories from my 40th birthday of thinking something needs to change. And I think the average, anecdotally, is that people stay stuck between 6 and 7 years.
is that right?
So, it really is powerful to think about how can we help highlight this journey in a way that we don't wait.
Absolutely. In being on this journey, and when I see younger in mothers, because really that was the key reason I made changes, because I could see my adult children in front of my eyes in my own home, now of legal drinking age, and watching me tell them, well, you shouldn't overdrink. You shouldn't drink and drive. You sh- are you having too much alcohol? Why are you bringing so much alcohol in the house? And then I'd turn around and pop open my wine bottle and sit down and drink wine, or dinner, with wine, or making dinner with wine, and seeing them watch me, it just all of a sudden came to a head for me. I don't know why I couldn't see that before for all those years, but it really, right around 57, started just hitting me that I need to make a change. I don't want them to remember their mother just being intoxicated and now, becoming a grandmother, just being that example. And just, I looked back all those years of really trying to moderate. And it was probably 7 to 10 years of just that whole cycle of trying to moderate my drinking. And I'll only drink on Friday and Saturdays, turned into Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then just the daily routine. And it really, really was just hiding pain and hiding loneliness. Now my kids were growing up. They didn't really need me. I was shifting identities. It was part of my
Yes.
life. De-stressing from work on a nightly basis. I used it for so many reasons. And thankfully, it wasn't a rock bottom. Thankfully, it was just not feeling well, not sleeping well, anxiety, relationships, and it all just was coming to the surface. And it wasn't until I was talking with my daughter, just saying, I don't understand this. I don't know why I can't just stop. I couldn't understand it. And she's like, well, Mom, I saw this book on TikTok. It's called This Naked Mind. And I'm like, what is it? What's the name of it? I'll just order it. And I ordered it. And voila.
Yeah, isn't it amazing? There's that very beautiful saying that when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And you highlight such an important point, is that the reason that we're drinking in our 50s and 60s looks very different than when we started, maybe as a social drinker, or drinking to have fun with and connect with our spouse.
For
Just
sure.
like I did, Michelle, I found myself drinking for all of the reasons. Like alcohol was the answer to everything. And I recently listened to a talk by a man named Chip Conley, and he talked about midlife and how many transitions there are in midlife. And part of this journey is understanding the healthy ways to navigate these transitions. So you mentioned, empty nest, stressed with work, your identity changing. Yeah, these are some of those things that happen when we're in our 50s and 60s. And I think it's so valuable to help women understand that this is a normal part of this midlife experience, but we also have new tools.
Oh, for sure. Oh my gosh. If I only knew the tools I learned on my journey of becoming alcohol free. If someone had just told me some of those, if someone had just shared their story, I will take full responsibility for my drinking. But had I had that exposure, but you know what? I've learned it's just never too late. It's never too late. And boy, are there tools out there. And I certainly use them now because life isn't perfect. Tools and some great friends and colleagues that make it all so worthwhile just being alcohol free. And it is so true how using alcohol to get through midlife, and really it was all those painful things, right down to taking care of a sick mother. And that's when I could see it. I could see the drinking just getting worse. And I was just dealing with the super sadness. And then to just know, I was sort of in this fog of, I wanted to get lit. I wanted to just numb out that entire phase of my life. And that's not the way to do it. I could have showed up.
You bring up a really painful part of midlife is often that caretaking of our elderly parents or losing our parents. And it is part of the transition, but some of the women that I work with who are in that caregiving role, I see that as a place that is so challenging. And often because we've seen alcohol work in other parts of our life, and work, I'll put work in quotes, but we've seen it bring some temporary relief. We've seen it help us maybe turn our brain off or feel like a reward after struggling so hard, or numbing out what the reality of what's really happening with our parents. That is one of those places where drinking really can uptick.
For sure. And I think that had hit it like it was the perfect storm for me. Mm-hmm. It was years building. And then that was at the end. That's when it was that year. A couple of years, actually. It took me a couple of years when she was sick and then when she had passed. So for sure, it was an uptick that really brought me to, like, I really need to do something about this. This is
Michelle, what were your biggest fears around not drinking?
I wasn't sure how I would deal with hurtful, painful things in my life. Mm-hmm. I didn't really almost know how to live life without alcohol. It had been in my life for 4+ decades. I started when I was 14, and it was infiltrated my whole life. Everything focused, my family events. My husband and I, we were drinking partners. We were high school sweethearts. Our whole lives revolved around drinking. So I was afraid I wouldn't know how to even just handle regular life. Like, how do I go on vacation? How do I go out to eat at the restaurant? What do I have after I go skiing? What do I do after a hike? Those would have been the craft brewery or the winery. Mm-hmm. And to learn just that you can do other things that are fun and active and rewarding. I was fearful of not fitting in. Mm-hmm. Not fitting in with my friends. I still have friends. So you're still not drinking?
Yeah, I hear you. Yes, it's interesting.
And so some of those were probably my biggest fears, and being bored. Mm. Being bored. And then how do I relax at the end of the day? How do I do that? So I had some big fears for sure. For sure.
Yeah. And were any of those biggest fears realized when you stopped drinking?
None.
Isn't that amazing? Isn't that
amazing? So amazing. It's so amazing. Not one of them ever came to fruition at all.
Yeah. And I feel that way too. And I've of course, shared my story before, but I was right there with you. I thought I would be boring. I thought other people would be boring. I thought, oh my gosh, going to a party with a bunch of drunks, that's never going to be fun. And it's so interesting. So you and I were recently at a weekend that was highlighting sober socializing, and it was so much fun. Like, there was no alcohol, and oh my gosh, we danced and we took a ferry and we enjoyed each other's company and we laughed. Oh my goodness. I laughed so much that weekend.
So much. And that's the best part of it, is just you're there. you're enjoying people and the events and the sights and the sounds. And I wasn't doing that for 40 years, really.
Yeah, we think we are, but it's such a
Right.
false sense of enjoyment when alcohol's in the picture. And it's hard to describe to someone who is in the midst of it. But you
That's
and I are living proof, and we've rubbed shoulders with a lot of amazing women in their 50s and 60s who have made this change.
we sure have.
So, what was your biggest surprise when you stopped drinking?
My biggest surprise, really, I found my voice. I found me, and I'll tell you this real quick story. I went off to a Costa Rica yoga retreat in 2019, right before I decided to go alcohol free, because this was going to be my transition. This is when I'm going to make it. So I just booked a trip. I didn't tell. I mean, I told my family after, but oh, you're going by yourself, and my husband's like, what? What do you do? It was in the organic, food and so forth. And at that retreat, I thought that was going to be my transition. I was going to just shut off alcohol. But I was the one who found the bar.
Mm.
I was the one, it wasn't, it was moderate drinking, but still, it was me. So that was my answer. And now it was crushed. I came back from Costa Rica thinking, wow, I didn't make my transition. That was going to be my turning point. But it was an artist retreat also. So there was some painting. And when I arrived, she just said, I want you to paint why you came here. And I painted me. Me. I wanted to find me. And I did find me. I found me the hard way, but I had to be alcohol free to find me. I found my voice. I was a follower. I followed the crowd my entire life until I was alcohol free.
I love that story so much. And you highlight two really important things. And one is that it's not our place, our circumstance, it's not our physical place on this earth that is creating this tension between drinking and over drinking and not drinking. People will say, I just need, an alcohol time out. But putting yourself even in a magical place without, the daily grind did not create the change. And so it's so powerful what you say there, Michelle, is that it has to come from within.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing is, I love that you went from a follower to a leader.
Yes. Yes. And I'm learning those skills and building those skills. It didn't happen overnight. But what did happen is that I learned about boundaries. I learned about finding myself. I learned I have capability and promise and future and growth and learning and no more following anymore. And it just was so freeing. It's still freeing. And I'm
Yes.
still
And how
in
many
that
years
phase.
has it been since you stopped drinking?
3.5.
Wow.
2020 was I was in a different program for about 6 months, alcohol free, and then had some data points in 2020. Not many, but a few. And then it wasn't until I found This Naked Mind personally and was able to go on a live alcohol experiment in January of 21. So I believe it's going to be 3.5 years.
Yeah, it's amazing. Good for you. Yeah, I love that. And you at some point decided to become a This Naked Mind coach. And wow, talk about finding your voice. Tell us about that briefly, how you made that decision to go from maybe, just kind of barely telling people to really shouting it from the rooftops.
Yes, yes. And that was a challenge for sure. I joined my live alcohol experiment online through This Naked Mind. And I actually, when I joined, you have a choice to go on camera on Zoom or not. in the PATH program. It was a year-long program. And I went in signing on with just my first name, Michelle, and my middle name, Renee. And that's it. There was no way I was going to let anyone know I was doing this program. And the first couple of Zooms, I didn't go on camera. But as people were sharing, and it just felt more natural. So eventually I opened the camera and I kept my name. So I kept Michelle Renee. And that's really how I built my coaching business, because I ended up doing a year-long PATH program through This Naked Mind, and just taking that year, and just probably one of the best years of my life, the transition of where I was to where I wanted to be. And I was able to walk over that bridge. And I just was so excited and wanted to share this amazing secret. How
it does feel like, wait, why doesn't everyone know this?
This is incredible. Like, why wouldn't we be sharing this? Why didn't anyone tell me about this? And that's all I wanted to do. And the opportunity to join the Institute and become a coach just lent itself to the next step for me. It was natural. So that's how I was able to transition into that. I just basically want to share the secret that I've learned being alcohol free. I have
so beautiful.
My new magical mornings. I just enjoyed my new happy hour, which is Michelle's Magical Mornings. And I just wouldn't want anything different. And my only regret is that it took decades. But you know what? That's okay. That's how my journey was supposed to be. And I'm hoping by sharing and coaching that someone else's journey will be a lot shorter than what mine was.
Yes, that truly is the message. I love the idea that our mess becomes our message, and that we can be part of that inspiration from someone else. Not that we have arrived anywhere, but that we are a guide who is just a little further ahead, and we really want to stop keeping this beautiful transition called alcohol-free living a secret.
Yes. I know, that is so true.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's been delightful. And I just wish you so much success in your coaching business. And, it's really powerful to, as you mentioned, find your voice.
Oh, for sure. Thank you, Terry. It's been great.
All right. So now I want to introduce you to another amazing woman who stopped drinking in her 50s and beyond. So Angela Sheridan, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Terry, it's good to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Yes, and I am delighted to talk to you because I think your story is really powerful, and it's all of our stories in some ways. When we are drinking and over drinking in our 50s, 60s, and beyond, there's a lot of reasons that alcohol is showing up. So how old were you when you stopped drinking?
So I stopped drinking this last time in 2022. So I was in my 50s, and I had tried before in my 40s. So I was an older mother. I had my son when I was 40. And that's when my drinking kind of changed a little bit. Now, I'm not going to say it wasn't problematic earlier than that, but I mean, what's problematic? I drank very much the same way that all my friends drank, a lot more than is recommended on the weekends, socially, and had the same values around drinking that everybody has. We are led to believe that it's safe, and we're led to believe that it's necessary, and it's neither. And that's what I've discovered in this last 2 years. But when my son was about 3 years old, so that's when my drinking kind of changed, because my life changed. There's a massive life change, right? When you have a child.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's huge, right? It's one of the biggest things there. And I think this probably happens to a lot of women, actually. So you find yourself going to the gym, seeing your friends, picking up and going where you want when you want, right? You have your social life, you go to work, you go to the gym after, you do whatever you do, you take your yoga classes, and life is busy. And then I drank on the weekends, and I drank socially, and I drank, I never drank at home. I never drank home alone. I just didn't do that. And then I have this child, and I can't do that stuff anymore. And I was feeling lonely, overwhelmed. Overwhelm was huge. I was working full time, trying to raise this precious child that I just adored. um, and, at the end of the day, and my husband had just started a business. He wasn't home most of the time. I had very little support around me. And so at the end of the day, I would put the baby to bed and have a couple of glasses of wine, because you feel like that's your reward for working so hard. And you want to kind of switch that brain off. So,
Yes.
from all of the thinking that you have to do for not just yourself anymore, you have to think for another person, another human being. It's huge. And so that's when my drinking, I would say, ramped up. And it probably still looked normal to most people, because it was just a few glasses of wine in the evening. And most moms would tell you they feel like they deserve that at the end of the night. It helps them relax. It rewards them. It, helps them sleep, that kind of thing. But really deep down inside, you sort of know that it's not having a great effect on you. You feel it in your body, you feel it in your emotions. And now I understand the science. I know why. I started to feel like I couldn't take joy in almost anything in my life anymore. And I think of myself as a joyful person. And joy is an emotion that I love to feel, and feel easily. It's something I can access easily. But in those years, I could not. And here I am, a young mother. I was 40. I felt young. Here I am, mother of a baby, and feeling like I should be feeling all those feelings. I should be feeling joyful, and I should be satisfied by that, and all of the shoots, right? But when he was around 3, I'm not feeling well, because this creeps up on you. Your tolerance increases. You drink more to get the same effect, and then you start to feel unwell, because it is a poison, a toxin, and it's not safe at any level. And we know this now. Most countries are saying that there is no safe level of alcohol consumption. So I'm starting to feel unwell. I'm worried about the drinking. I go see my doctor, and she says I can go to AA. I had no clue. I had no clue what AA was. I didn't feel like I was an alcoholic. I had no rock bottom. I wasn't, I wasn't missing days at work. I was still going to work every day. I was still living my life. I was just feeling miserable. I wasn't feeling healthy, either mentally, physically, emotionally, or spiritually.
Mm.
And I knew, I had the inkling that the alcohol was the problem, but I didn't know where to go with it. So I did go to AA because I was desperate, and I really went, and I did it for my child, because I wanted to be the best mother I could be for him. And I didn't feel I could be when I was so lacking in joy, was one thing.
Yeah.
I couldn't be emotionally available the way I wanted to be. I was tired and exhausted, and some days hungover, and worried about, I'm drinking in the evening and my child's asleep, and what if he needs me, and I'm not able to drive, or I had all the worries. It was just hanging over me, and not a good way to feel. So I did AA. I went for a year. It was a white knuckle ride. It was terrible. I didn't understand the science. I didn't know. I just thought it was my fault, and that's what I was told, that I was an alcoholic and it was my fault, and I had to put that label on myself. And it didn't feel true to me. It didn't feel right. I didn't feel like this was a disease. I knew there had to be something else.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't drink for 4 years, and I didn't drink. I just abstained, but I didn't really learn anything about the reasons why I drank, or about my beliefs around alcohol. I didn't learn any of that, and I didn't understand the science. And I just went through life thinking that there was something wrong with me, and everybody else was a normal drinker, and I was an abnormal drinker, and like I could never drink again. And although I think I always knew I would. So
That's such a painful place, right? And thank you for sharing that, because you bring up a lot of, I think, these common themes. And, a couple things that you said there that I want to really highlight for my listeners, because we talk about those shoulds. And, life can become a lot of shoulds. And we're really frayed at both ends. And particularly in our later years, we have all of these life transitions. You mentioned that your husband was, starting a business. And so you were kind of the single parent. You were still working full time. You were lonely and overwhelmed, and all of the things that had been feeding that joy were, not that your child didn't bring joy, but, you had to switch. That's a huge transition, right? And as we age, we go through these midlife transitions of retiring, an empty nest, and aging parents, and, shifting finances and priorities and health scares or health concerns. And so I'm really impressed that you even went to your doctor, because that's a real bold move. And I can see that, this journey you were on, it's just, if, what I've come to realize, that if we put behavior first, we miss a lot of the important root cause,
Yes.
understanding, as you mentioned. And I think that we need to put some of the fun back in becoming alcohol free, right?
Yes, I agree. 100%. And that was my experience with This Naked Mind, which is how I actually stopped drinking this time. And it's a very different experience. I have no desire to drink anymore. And I think, at the age of, in my 50s, I think I was starting to feel hopeless. Like, is this going to be my life? I remember feeling like, you know, am I going to have to choose not to drink while always wanting to drink? Right. Because, of course, it advanced again. I started drinking socially again, and then it advanced again. And then I was starting to feel that kind of hopeless way. And then, no, the first thing I was told, and this is what I'd like to say to anyone who's listening, who is in their 50s, that it's just a number. And on my path, I met people 50s, 60s, 70s. I have people now that I'm coaching in their 70s on my platform. And they are so inspiring, because none of us, it's not over till it's over. Your life's not over till it's over. And you deserve today to live your best life.
Yes.
And I was not doing that with alcohol. And it doesn't matter if you're 50 or 60 or 70 or 80 even. Today, you can choose to live your best life. And what I heard that made a difference to me then was, it's not your fault. That I had believed all the messaging around alcohol. I believed that it was safe for me to drink, and that it was normal and natural to drink, and that every event of my life required it. And that's the messaging we get in our societies, our families. It's there. It's everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So learning that it wasn't my fault, giving myself grace, recognizing that it wasn't me that was broken somehow, that there's something messed up about the societal messaging that we're getting. That's a big deal. Mm-hmm. And though that message took me to a different place, it allowed me to learn about the reasons and the jobs I was given to alcohol.
Yep.
Talk about a lot, right? What jobs are we giving it? And it also led me to build a toolbox. Mm-hmm. Get in it, because we do need toolboxes. We have pain in our life, right? And you talked about empty nesting. I'm kind of going through that now. I have a 14-year-old, and my nest is still, he's there, but he's flying off. It's a transition. It's a big transition in life. And these transitions are painful, and we do need tools to get through them. But I have much better tools now. And before, I would have drank over that stuff, and I don't have to drink over it anymore. I don't have to punish myself twice, which is what we do with alcohol, right?
Yeah, that's a really important point. And so what would you say, Angela, was your biggest fear when you looked at your life without alcohol? What were you afraid of?
So, of course, I was afraid I was always going to want it
Mm.
while not being able to have it. And that's a painful thought. That's a really painful thought to look at a life of not being able to have the very thing you want the most. And at that time, I did want it the most. And so I wanted to not want it anymore. And that was the message I heard from This Naked Mind and Annie Grace's book, that it was possible to just not want it anymore. It was possible for it to be small and irrelevant in my life. That was the message I needed to hear, and that's the message I heard. And that's the one that made the difference to me, not the shame, not the blame, the you're to fall, not the powerlessness. Because this program that we teach now, you and all the other coaches that trained with This Naked Mind, it's empowering.
Yes.
It's teaching us how to take back our power. And that's what we as women in our 50s and 60s and 70s need. We need to step into our power and give up all of those societal expectations in a sense, and take back control of our life. And that's what I feel like I did.
Yeah.
And definitely leaning into the tools that I was taught, the tactics and the tools. So when the difficult times come, and they do, because that's life, right? I have things I can reach for. I have community. I have things that I do on a daily basis to nourish myself, and to nourish my nervous system, so that when the hard times come, I'm practiced at those things. So it's meditation. And I don't sit in a cushion for 30 minutes. I confess, I do not do that. I'm not real good at sitting still. I do practice mindfulness, and I do that by bringing my attention to my breath. I walk in nature, and I bring my attention to the senses of the things around me, the sounds, the sights, and I just bring my attention there, and it brings me out of my thinking, out of my anxious thoughts, and into a place of mindfulness. So those are some of the tools that I use to kind of calm my nervous system. And most recently, I did your nutrition course, and that just eating the right way reduces your stress massively. It keeps giving up sugar was a big deal, but I definitely find my emotions are much more even around that stuff as well now. So there are so many tools out there that we just don't access because we just come to a place of thinking that alcohol's the quick fix for everything, right?
Yeah. And you bring up a really important point. Thank you for that, we do have these things still happen to us. Sometimes I think when we're still in that cycle of drinking and over drinking and having a lot of cognitive dissonance, disparaging thoughts around, is this possible? Will this work? What does it look like? We think we're signing up for either a life of deprivation, like you mentioned, or if I can just get to the other side, this is the one thing. And it's neither of those things. It's life. But the beautiful thing is that when we show up present, and we show up connected, and we show up with our emotions available to us, there is work to be done. But as Brooke Castillo from the Life Coach School says, it's work worth doing. And so I love this for you, Angela. So what would you say has been the biggest gift of taking alcohol out of your life?
Getting my joy back. That was huge. That awe and wonder that you feel in life, that it's just natural. We're born with it. Children feel it easily. Children don't hide their emotions, right? They show you all, and they feel joy easily. And just getting that back has been huge. And I didn't have it for the 4 years that I stopped drinking with AA. I didn't get that joy back because I still felt disempowered. I still felt like it was shameful, that it was me, that there was something wrong with me. And I don't feel that anymore. I do feel free now. And, we're made for freedom. We're supposed to be free.
Yes. Yeah, that's so beautiful. Thank you for that gift of hope for everyone out there who maybe like you has tried or even had some time without drinking. Because sometimes that is our story, is that we try and we fall back into using alcohol, and it takes more and more space in our life. And we get a lot of messages that, well, you're just weak, or you won't be able to do it, or you tried and failed. And it can be very hard to start again. So thank you for the hope of, sharing that it just because you had an experience that maybe didn't go the way you wanted it to, it's not too late and you're never out of the game. And I often think that people say, well, it's supposed to look a certain way. And the reality is everybody's journey is everybody's journey. And there is a path. And you mentioned tools, and I think that's so helpful too, because I often tell my clients, like, if it's not working yet, don't give up. There's more tools. Like there are an endless number of ways to try things and build that toolkit that is really important for you. And your toolkit might have grounding in nature, and it might have breath work and nourishment. And someone else's toolkit might be exercise and volunteering and, vacationing and trying new things. And so it's so beautiful that we're not limited. And once we tap into that, we really are limitless.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, the journey goes on. That's the thing. I saw everyone's journey was different. I went through a whole year with a group of other people who were becoming alcohol free, and all of our journeys look different. Some people stopped on day one. I wasn't that person. I needed to learn about the reasons why I drank, and I did the work, and that's kind of like how I learned that. I learned what jobs I was given alcohol. I learned the new tools. I learned it through my drinking without shame, and treating the drinking as a point of curiosity of, oh, why did I think I needed that drink right now? What did I think it was going to do for me? And did it do that for me? And 9 times out of 10, well, 10 times out of 10, actually, I found out it very temporarily does something for you. But then you have to take the punishment of the next few hours of getting down, waking up in the middle of the night, the stress levels, the heart rate's up, and then hungover in the morning. It's never worth it. It's never worth it.
You're right. As you mentioned before, we have the punishment twice. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your journey. And I'm so happy that you're now this Naked Mind coach and doing this work in the world and helping other women find their own version of freedom. So thank you for joining today.
Thank you, Terry.
Well, now I have with me my friend and fellow coach, Maryann Petcack, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this place of gray area drinking and thriving after alcohol. So, Maryann, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Terry. It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah, I love catching up with you. This has been like old home week for me as I've talked to different coaches. But really what I want to highlight is this journey that happens in midlife. And, I think it was Brene Brown who said that, the universe grabs us by the shoulders and says, stop, effing around, basically, and pay attention. This is your life. And so you and I were chatting just before I hit record that you've been on this journey for a little while. So how old were you when you stopped drinking?
So let's see, that would have been, I was 60 and 6 months. And I thought 60 is a good age to stop drinking. So I made it 6 months, and that's when I put the bottle down.
Mm-hmm. Good for you. Good for you. Yeah. And I think that sometimes these big birthdays remind us that as you said, we sort of have a shelf life. And so time is still ticking by. And this is our opportunity to really look at the gifts of this midlife transition. There's a lot of challenges that come too. And you were sharing with me that one of the challenges that you faced head on was this transition of caring for our aging parents and walking them through their final days.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it was tough, but being the oldest, I shouldered most of the responsibility just because that was my personality. And my mom had passed away 2.5 years ago, and my dad was hanging on for us, until we gave him permission to go. Because when my mom first passed away, I said to my dad, "You're not going anywhere." I mean, it was selfish, but I thought I can't do this twice, And the time I got to spend with him was time that I wouldn't trade for the world, because we had stories and pictures and just, I don't know, a different side to him came out. And I was the recipient of all this advice that he gave me and all his memories and all his stories. And I think it solidified in me my desire to try to live to be 94 like he did. And he never drank much. He wasn't a big drinker, and all the fun he had. And I thought, this is a good life that my dad has. And I would like to try to still make him proud, and carry on without alcohol in my life. And I haven't. So, I mean, I have without drinking. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think it is just a touch point for so many of us. And I haven't reached that stage with my mom yet. She is a very lively and vibrant 85-year-old. But, I do know that it is inevitable that she won't be here forever. And so this place of being alcohol free really does, as you mentioned, allow us to be more present in that time that we do have, and maybe perhaps to treasure it in a different way.
You're right. Yeah. Being present is what it's all about. And I didn't know if something was happening to him. My husband and I would, take him to the emergency room, and, we were responsible for so many things. And I can't imagine being, passing out at 9 o'clock at night and not hearing the phone ring or not getting that call, So it's kind of a mature way to be, I think.
Yeah, we finally get to reach maturation at in our 60s, right? I love it. So one of the things that sometimes keeps us stuck with letting go of alcohol are some of these fears that we have around what life will be like. So would you share with us some of the things that you might have been afraid of when you were thinking about what life would be like without alcohol?
Sure. The main thing would be I wouldn't be able to fit in or have a relationship with my husband unless I was drunk, which is sad to say. But I am divorced from my first husband, and which was, the wrong thing, but it lasted 16 years. And I learned to drink through my relationship with him. So when I married my now husband, I was relying on alcohol with the first, and it just kind of carried over to the second because I thought I needed it in order to have any kind of marital relationship with a man. I did that to myself. That was how I was thinking. And what it turned out to be was I would drink so much that I would pass out, I'm ashamed to say. And I know they talk about in the live alcohol experiment, and sex without alcohol. And it's so much better. Like, what was I denying myself and my husband, a partner that had her wherewithal and was with him 100% vulnerable and everything, instead of hiding behind the alcohol and being somebody that I was not. And now I can be who I am. I finally thrown off the cloak of alcohol and discovered my true self. And I'm not ashamed to share it. And I want to share it. So.
Yeah, thank you for that point of vulnerability. And I was recently in fact, I had Sarah Olson on the podcast last year, or I guess earlier this year, around sex without alcohol, because she gave a talk at an event, and I just met up with her again a few weeks ago in Portland, Maine. But it really is something that we tend to shy away from. And we have so much cultural messaging that we can't, we can't just be ourselves. And often our first sexual experiences with alcohol. And so we really are trained up that that is necessary in order for us to enjoy the act or be present. And it's actually just the opposite. And it's another beautiful part of untangling this relationship with alcohol. And as we discover more of who we are, we find that we actually really like ourselves. And so do other people.
And we're robbing ourselves, really, if we're drinking to disguise our emotions or because we're embarrassed or whatever, whatever we're trying to hide. And we're just robbing ourselves. And we're put here on this earth to enjoy things, to enjoy pleasure. And why not allow ourselves the opportunity to do it? I don't want to be on my deathbed and say, oh, I wish I would have, slept with the lights on. It's just, it just opened up a whole new world, and it's nothing to be afraid of. That's what I've found. The older I get and the more secure I get in who I am, the more secure I am in who I am. And I'm not afraid to be who I am and to be with my husband. And I shouldn't be, you should want to be with your husband. So,
yeah. And you mentioned that he also has chosen this path of not drinking. Did that happen around the same time as you, or did that follow?
No, he's not. He was a police officer, so he hasn't drank alcohol in almost 50 years. It's been a long time. Yeah. He used to, before he was on the job, they all did, initially. But then he said, look, I can't be a good officer and drink, and a lot of the old time guys did. But you have to be clear headed in those situations. And he was in charge of homicide, and you can't get called out in the middle of the night if you're drunk or whatever. So it was good because he was always supportive of me when I drank. He would always open the bottle and pour the wine, and he never drank. And now that I don't drink, like I told you earlier, we bought all this non-alcohol stuff to drink just to have a beer with our baked potato tonight. It's nice to have that. And I can't imagine he put up with me for all those years. I mean, we've been married up to 20 years. I can't imagine putting up with somebody that drank and I didn't, I probably wouldn't do it.
Yeah. It's interesting, right? The perspective we have on the other side. You bring up an interesting point because our media and the cultural messaging around alcohol, like I've never been married to a cop, but every cop I see on TV drinks. And if you think about how ridiculous that is, I often will tell people, like, when we're all caught up in this idea or this thought that alcohol helps us relax or alcohol calms our nerves, I often ask people, would you want your brain surgeon to have a couple shots before surgery? And of course, the answer is no. And it's very much the same. Would you want the homicide detective to show up to solve your loved one's murder with a couple of shots under their belt? And we get how ridiculous that is. And yet society tells us alcohol is a part of this. And it's really not true.
You're right. It's accepted. Just like, would you want a fireman coming to put a fire out in your house if he's 3 sheets to the wind? I mean, you rely on these people to be sober and of present mind and body. You just assume that they will be. And until you said that, I never even thought about it, but I think the message about drinking anyway is getting out there, drinking alcohol, and less people are doing it. Which, is good, it's good that they're not, but to be truly functional and to follow your path and to just know what you're doing from day to day, I think you have to be sober. You can't, like you said, romanticize, a sexual, have a glass of wine, before you go to bed or whatever, I would drink a bottle. I mean, how wrong is that? I would drink a bottle because that's just what I did. And then of course I was no good, for anything. So it robs everybody of everything. And I wish I had realized this maybe 20 or 30 years ago, instead of using it to cope with my then marriage. But I'm doing it now. So I'm grateful for the opportunity now to see things straight. And now I look forward to my herbal tea at night.
Yeah, absolutely. And you bring up another question I have for you is, many of the women that I interviewed around this topic, and I definitely want to talk to more ladies, but many of us kind of had this idea that it was too late to quit. And I wonder if that thought ever surfaced for you.
Well, my mom was Irish and she had two sisters. And so obviously they're like 25, 30 years older than me. And every party they drink. And they also smoke cigarettes. And I think I just saw it as something that could be done, that, that you do when you reach a certain age. But then both my aunts died of cancer. They were both smokers. And so I started thinking, I heard you talk on the podcast with that Jackie, how you were always into fitness and wellness, but you drank. And same with me. From the day I got out of high school, I joined a gym, and a ballet sports way back when was really big. And I still, I'm still into fitness, being a yoga instructor. But I thought, how wrong is that? That's kind of polluting the waters. I took a Pilates reformer class a couple of years ago, and the girl next to me said, "Oh, now we can go home and go to bed." And I said, "Well, I'm going to go home and have wine." And she said, "Well, aren't you mitigating what you just did on the reformer?" So, and I never thought about it that way. I was thinking I'm burning calories ahead of time so I can indulge later. And that's not the right way of thinking. Aside from calories, you're putting poison into your body. So I was thinking years before that I've got to stop. And, these women that drink and have a cigarette and they're 99 years old, I'm like, okay, well, that might be in my genes. I don't know, but I don't want to feel like that anymore. I want to feel clear-headed.
Yeah, that's a powerful message for sure. And I think it's so good. So what do you think is the number one gift of not drinking at this stage?
I will say that before my feet hit the bed in the morning, I am excited for the day ahead. I feel great. I wake up without an alarm. I am full of energy. And that energy drives me through the day. And that energy is a positive energy, and it touches my relationship with my husband, with my children, with the grandchildren, with the stepkids. I feel better. I feel more positive. Better relationships with people. And before I was suspicious all the time, and I was just small and tiny, and I was negative. And now I feel so positive and so uplifted and so happy. A total turnaround from where I was when I drank. And I would never want to be that person again. It squashed who I really am. And it didn't allow me to share the gifts that I was given. And whether it's an exuberant personality or positive person, or, trying to put everything they have into their business, I really feel great about myself and my future now.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I love that. And that is such a hopeful message. And we all can have that. We can all get to that place. Mm-hmm. Alcohol feels like sometimes it's this huge boulder in the way. But the reality is that we can either chip away at it, or we can just roll it out of the way. We can walk around it. There's so many ways to tackle this drinking and over drinking. And no matter the journey from here to there is the place when you arrive where we really do have this new, like you said so beautifully, this exuberance for life. And so that really shines in your personality, Maryann. And thank you so much for sharing your story and being vulnerable about the journey with your husband and your own journey with caregiving. And it's just, it's so refreshing to be able to talk honestly and boldly about this, because it's so important for the women that we serve. And I am so grateful that you are doing your work in the world and that we are colleagues. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Terry. I appreciate the time to speak and just to unload a little bit and maybe make clearer the path to where I'm headed. Yeah, it's a brilliant future, and I want to grab it with both hands and with everything I've got.
Hey, I want to thank you for tuning in and listening to The Sober Edge.
This is a place to have important conversations and a safe place to question everything you thought you knew about drinking. If you're looking for your sober edge, I invite you to connect with me at thesobernutritionist.com, where you can grab my free resource, 5 Healthy Reasons to Take a Break. And I would be grateful if you would take a moment to rate and review this podcast so together we can reach more people who are looking for their sober edge.